Alright guys, so last year in 2024 I captured majority of my hobby and leisure photography using the Fujifilm XT5. Now guys, while I have mostly positive experiences with this camera and the lenses that I selected to use, I missed quite a few photo opportunities from hardware or software issues, as well as some frustrations with Fujifilm as a brand. This is regarding to Fujifilm focusing on releasing new cameras aimed at content creators rather than their core audience of photographers. Additionally, the issues surrounding the firmware updates have been extremely frustrating, especially with the Fujifilm XT5 affecting both photo and video performance. I did notice that Fujifilm did announce a new firmware update before the end of the year, so I updated my XT5 and went out with my photography friend Mac Ruderman to test it out. So in today's video, I want to share some of the photos I captured with the new firmware and talk about my experience with that update, but more importantly, I want to talk about my thoughts and opinions on Fujifilm as a brand, my predictions or hopes for where Fujifilm might be heading into 2025, and my plans on using Fujifilm cameras in the future. So let's just jump right into it. Flies are on your bag. Look. In today's video, I want to share my personal experience and opinions. Please take this information with a grain of salt before leaving a nasty negative comment, but I do really appreciate constructive feedback. And with that said, let's jump into the positives of Fujifilm. The number one positive for me, which is quite ironic as I don't use it as intended, is the film simulations. I love how the film simulations look. I have an editing workflow I use to get the look out of my RAW files, which is why I don't store or use the JPEG files. However, I still shoot with the film simulations selected in the live view. Currently, I'm using the Astia Soft film simulation, which is very similar to my Lightroom presets and how I like to edit my photos. I find that this edited live view helps me take better photos by allowing me to see what an edited photo may look like while I'm out shooting. This feature is particularly valuable when shooting with other photographers or models, as they often respond saying, wow, that actually looks great. In contrast, when I go out to shoot on my Nikon ZF or my Sony a7 IV, everything appears to be unedited, of course, and just lacks appeal or contrast. For me, there is a significant advantage to using Lightroom for correcting white balance, exposure, the tone, masking. Lightroom offers more advanced features than the film simulation JPEGs. However, I fully understand why some people prefer not to edit their photos. For example, many of my friends are wedding photographers who edit photos from 9 till 5, and the last thing they want to do is to go on a holiday and then have to spend more time editing photos. One aspect I love about Fujifilm as a brand is the look and the aesthetic of their cameras. Each camera has a fantastic appearance, from the XT5 to the GFX system. Each model serves a purpose. These cameras are not designed to do the same thing. The GFX is a professional high-end camera with a large 100 megapixel sensor, while the XT5 is a more consumer-orientated camera. Regardless, all the cameras look absolutely fantastic, and I don't believe that Fujifilm has made an unattractive impressive camera that I can recall or that I've ever seen. And these cameras being inspired by a film camera design, people tend to be less on guard when you shoot in places like the beach or while doing street photography. You can literally just be a fly on the wall and people are unlikely to approach you to ask what you're photographing and why. In contrast, if you were to go out with a large camera and lens, people immediately perceive you as a professional photographer and may question your presence. Additionally, you're more likely to be asked to leave places where photography is typically restricted. Lastly, these cameras are extremely fun to use. The ergonomics and user experience is just fun. I can just snap a couple photos and just keep going. There's something special about Fujifilm, whether it's the look, the ergonomics, the size, or the setup. Shooting with Fujifilm cameras is generally just enjoyable. And among all the different camera manufacturers that I've used in the past, I believe Fujifilm is definitely the most fun to operate, aside from an old camera or a film camera, for an example. Alright, quick pause, this week's video doesn't have a sponsor, but if you want to support me and you like the way that I edit my photos, I do sell Lightroom presets, which are linked in the description down below. And guys, if you sign up to my newsletter, you can get a little bit of a cheeky discount code. And with all that said, let's move into what's been upsetting me about Fujifilm last year. Fujifilm as a brand has a strong grasp on a niche within photography. While many camera manufacturers focus on creating the biggest, the best, and the fastest cameras, Fujifilm has concentrated on aesthetics and user experience. However, for me, the user experience diminished in 2024 and moving into 2025. Fujifilm seems to be shifting away from its core audience of dedicated photographers and leaning more into the content creation niche. I definitely understand there is a business case behind this, as content creation is rapidly growing, but it really feels like to me they've just neglected important camera lines like the XE and the X Pro series. They've also lagged in updating compact aesthetic lenses and releasing more cameras than lenses. Many of these older lenses just do not match the quality of the newer ones. Additionally, I feel that Fujifilm is starting to push a narrative of constant upgrading. Their frequent camera releases and lack of backward support for older gear contribute to a sense of consumerism and FOMO. Now, my biggest issue with the XT5 is its reliability. After my European trip, I stopped using it as much because the camera would randomly just shut off. And I've also heard similar complaints from friends who have owned the H2S or the H2. This makes the XT5 stressful to rely on, even for creating content here on YouTube. Last year, Fujifilm kept releasing firmware updates that didn't fix issues and sometimes just made things worse. I'm someone who trusts manufacturers and software updates, whether that's from my MacBook to all my cameras. I always just install them right away. However, after updating my XT5 and the new version of 4.1 came out in December of 2024, I noticed that the autofocus again wasn't really fixed. And this camera isn't as reliable in terms of autofocus compared to when I first bought the camera earlier in 2024. On my trip to Melbourne, I experienced misfocus even with simple scenes with that new firmware update. I was shooting at f8 using single AF, yet the camera misfocused on one of my favorite shots of the day. I always recompose for a backup shot, and despite using a small aperture where everything should have been in focus and sharp, the camera failed me. This has made me lose trust in Fujifilm's autofocus. Most of my work involves shooting for fun, but I also run a YouTube channel and want to print some of my photos or create a book. And moving into 2025, I need photos that are in focus and sharp at the very least. I'm not particularly concerned about full frame versus APS-C, sensor size, or resolution. I've discussed color science in previous videos, and I can achieve my look with any modern camera system. So, am I leaving Fujifilm? Over the last few months, I have been contemplating whether I should sell my XT5, reduce my gear load, and just use the money from the sale while to invest in a photography trip. However, I just want to have a Fujifilm camera in my life, and I think these are great little cameras. They are compact enough just to throw in a bag, allowing you to go out to take photos more often and with ease. So I've actually decided to give my XT5 to my partner Maria. She is a dedicated wedding photographer. She's also here on YouTube, so if you want to learn about wedding photography, check out her channel, which is linked down below. Maria and I travel a lot, and she wants a camera to take photos without worrying about editing the photos. She just wants to post the photos in an artistic way for her friends to see, and she actually handles all of our editing for our wedding photography work through our wedding company, Creative Wedding Co. So you bet she doesn't want to edit her photos while on holiday. Additionally, I own a variety of lenses and have decided to keep my 18 to 55mm lens. I think this lens is fantastic despite some minor issues. I've also decided to keep this absolutely fantastic Viltrox 56mm f1.7, and I'll keep my Fujifilm 27mm f2.8 pancake lens. Although that lens is not the best, it's incredibly small and has nice character to it. Lastly, Viltrox sent me their new 35mm f1.7, which provides a 50mm full frame equivalent. I believe these little Air series lenses from Viltrox are absolutely fantastic. Like, look how small and compact this lens is. It looks great on the XT5 and performs fantastically optically. It is an STM motor, so not as fast or quiet as a linear motor. This lens also doesn't have an aperture ring, so that can be annoying if you are a manual mode shooter, but for only $179 USD, this lens is a steal, and I have a link down below if you're interested in purchasing this lens. So yeah, sorry Fujifilm users, I think I owe you an apology if you felt like I've been overcritically or focused on the negatives in this video and in the past. That's not my intention. I've spent a year with the XT5, and while it's not perfect, it has brought me some incredible experiences and amazing images. At the end of the day, Fujifilm cameras have a unique charm that's really just hard to replace, and I totally understand why so many photographers love them like myself. I've had my frustrations, sure, but I'm not giving up on Fujifilm entirely. If anything, I'm hopeful for what's next. Alright guys, thank you for sticking with me, and please share your thoughts and opinions, all that good stuff in the comment section down below. Like and subscribe if you feel like it. And I've got some really fun photography content on the way for you guys in 2025. First video of the year. And yeah, we'll see you next week. Let's go.